Right, well, I have to say that was very half-hearted. This is the opening of the season, so we'd like a better round of applause, I think. Thank you. Yay, that's much better. That's better. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first pre-show talk of the 2018 season on the set of the astonishingly wonderful first show. I'm delighted.
I'm not the first show. You just
You are the
pointed at
first
me
show.
like that.
My name is Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist and a playwright and the biographer of CFT, and have the very great good fortune to be allowed to grill the directors and the writers and the actors through the course of the season. Tonight I'm talking to Sean Foley, who is no stranger to many of you. Obviously, welcome back, Sean.
Thank you very much.
CFT, here with the dresser. And of course, many of you will know the play What I Wrote. It's a wonderful thing to have you here opening this season. And we are on this fantastic set of Present Laughter. One of the things, I saw it on the first preview, that I was so entranced by was that in a way, everybody goes in to see a coward play with expectations of what a coward play is. But I felt that you'd made it completely fresh. It was itself, but it was like, oh God, that's Noel Coward, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship with Coward's work anyway? Or was it a particular thing that you were asked to direct this show?
I thought on reading the play, I would like to work on the play because I thought it was just so funny.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And I thought, I'm not going to give really a damn about how you're supposed to do Coward, or even, I didn't even really know what Coward's supposed to be, you know. I'm sure lots of people have seen plays of Noel Coward before, but I've only seen one in performance and I've read a couple of other ones. So I didn't really...
You've never acted in a Coward?
I've never acted, full stop. No, I've never...
Excuse me.
That's really good. You've never acted. No, I've never acted in a Coward, although I'd love to if anyone's...
It's Daniel Evans in the house.
It's Daniel. But, yeah, I think I just really responded to it on the level of comedy, on the possibilities it had for giving people a good time. I mean, Noel Coward said, I wrote this to cheer people up. He wrote it in 1939, and then it wasn't first performed until 1942, because literally the first performance was going to be pretty much on the outbreak of war, and they postponed it, and then first did it in 1942. But he said he wrote it to cheer it up. He also wrote it, of course, for him to have an enormous, stonking, great, wonderful part for himself. It's sort of about him and his circle, and about theatre, and about fame, and about growing up, really, you know, as a person having essentially a midlife crisis. And I just responded to it not only for its kind of line-to-line funniness, humour. I mean, sometimes they're absolute one-liners that bring the house down. Sometimes they're just incredibly complex, beautifully written, you know, dialogue that is amusing in all sorts of ways. You know, so he's got this line-to-line funniness, but also in this particular play, slightly unlike some of his other work, he's kind of combined this very English Cowardesque, actually, because he's the master of it, what we call high comedy, you know, sort of high British comedy, with farce. Yeah. So it's quite unusual, really, as a play, and that was one of the things that drew me to it, really, when I read it.
And when you first read it, do you immediately have a sense of, that's how I'm going to do it? Or is it a scene-by-scene building up? Once you've got your actors, you start to know all the funny moments, the bits that you will let the actors fall over and be dragged across the stage around somebody's leg, or the moments when you will tell them to dial back. You know, how much is it the big picture, or how much is it the scene-by-scene picture once you get into rehearsal? Because I was roaring with laughter, I have to say, all the way through it, but I kept thinking, did Sean decide that at the beginning, or is that something that's come out of the way they are playing it for you?
It's a combination of things. I don't plan to that degree, but in reading a script, I can see what the possibilities are very plainly. You have to build not only the situation, but you have to build the comedy. So quite usually in comic plays, you know, particularly farces, the action in the situation becomes as important as the words as you go on, and therefore, you know, which is really definitely more my background, is physical comedy and farce. So that can come in more and more into play in this particular Coward play as we go on. And then it is genuinely a question of, when you're in rehearsal, seeing what comes as you're working on it with the actors. You know, that they, of course, have, that's the whole point of working together on something. They, of course, have loads of brilliant ideas. I have ideas. They're all equally valid. And then we have to try them out in rehearsal and see how it all adds up, really.
And with the casting, I mean, there's Rufus Hound is absolutely wonderful. You know, everybody here will know him from many things, but obviously for Neville's Island down here. He's hilarious. But there's also wonderful big female roles around, not least of all Tracy-Ann Oberman, who is a great favourite for Chichester and was brilliant last year in Golda. But do you, when you were starting to cast, think, I need him, I need my Gary first, and then I need her, and then I need her? Or is it a more general sense that you have an ensemble in your mind, and then you go after the people that you most need to deliver your vision for it?
Well, again, if I may say,
Half
it's
and
a
half.
bit. Well, it's not quite half and half. You can't. I don't think you can, in this particular play, with such a sort of clear leading role. In that sense, you have to know who's going to play that, because stylistically that is a choice as well. There's ways of doing this play, I'm sure, equally valid. Alan Brodie, who runs the Coward Estate, came down to see it. Actually, it was the night you were there, and sort of said that the previous productions of this play in Britain. And like I say, there's not that many sort of major productions of it, actually, have, quote unquote, gone for the pathos more, and they've been much longer. And which I said, yes, but Noel Coward wrote a comedy.
That the longer? Yes.
He wrote a comedy. So you need someone who is expert comic actor to play it, I think. And then, of course, you go. I mean, particularly in this play, or in all the work I do, it really is, you know, quite apart from, obviously, in any play, there's lead parts and there's smaller parts, but you really do need to create an ensemble so that everybody on stage has their moment and is giving people pleasure and fun, you know, and they can't be ignored. And what's great about this production, I think, is that everybody's got, you know, wonderful moments throughout the evening.
And there was a wonderful sense, I saw it on the first preview, where the audience was becoming aligned to particular characters. So there were people who loved, you know, this person or that person. You could feel it in the audience. There was this great anticipation. But with Rufus Hound playing the lead, Gary Assadine, what I loved about what he had done and what you'd done was that he wasn't pretending to be Coward. Now, often that's how it goes with Noel Coward plays, but particularly this, because it's probably the most strongly autobiographical of Coward's work, isn't it?
Yes. The sort of decisions about how you're going to do it, in that sense, was already taken, because, like I said, when I read it, I responded to it as a comedy. You know, if it had been written last year, I would have responded to it. It's just, it's a very funny play. So I decided really to, in a sense, give it the...
sort of let it go.
Let it go. Yeah. It doesn't have to be in this box called Coward. It happens to be written by Noel Coward, and very brilliantly. Yeah. But all these things about it needs to be done in certain ways, which I think do, particularly, as you say, for this play, come from the fact of Coward having played it. And Noel Coward was a complete one-off. He had a very, very particular performing style that actually I don't think works for anybody else. Really. Yeah. So if you try and do it as Noel Coward, I don't think it works, because you're not Noel Coward. So our approach was to go, here is the character in this situation, and how do we play that situation?
So the elements of farce, I was certainly by the middle of Act 2 not hearing most of the lines because I was just laughing. And what I adored was all of that split-second timing, the doors opening, the shutting, the person there, the turning backwards and forwards with the heads, you're like owls, backwards and forwards. How do you rehearse that without an audience? And when you get into that first preview, does the whole show change because you've got an audience laughing back at you?
Well, in comedies, in every bit of theatre really, but particularly in comedies, the missing person, if you like, or character in rehearsal is the audience.
Right.
So they are part of the show. It's just that my job, using whatever experience and intuition I have, is to be the audience, as much as anything. Is to go, I think this is going to work, and I think they're going to react like this, and therefore I direct it like this, and give each beat this and this. I mean, the actors will tell you, the French word for rehearsal is répétition, which literally means repetition. And if you're going to do farce, you have to, because the glass has to go down at that moment, and you have to turn your head at that moment, and you can't. So it can't be willy-nilly. It can't be like, my character is feeling like this today.
Yes, it's a little bit blue.
It is actually painstaking and hard work, to get that into everybody's, bodies, literally, to be able to pull that off. So it's a lot of work for that kind of precision.
Like drilling. I mean, it's like a drill, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
But when you get on this wonderful stage and you're doing the tech and you're getting, all of that sort of, this is over there and the light is there and the shadow's there, when the audience comes in, if you feel that something that worked in the rehearsal room isn't quite landing, at what point do you decide that you change it? Or do you just feel that it's the audience, the show needs to find its own pace? Because comedy is so different and so much harder in some respects in that.
Yes. I mean, I always think so, but then I would.
You would?
If people's going to see a drama or a tragedy, I always say, well, were they crying?
Mostly no.
Mostly no.
Yeah.
But you know damn well, in a comedy, if they're not laughing, it's not working.
Yeah.
So it's really...
But do you change it then? Or do
yes,
you just
of course.
do you?
But this is different in the sense that this is a play. You can't go changing the lines willy-nilly because that's not written like that. You have to find a new way of performing it, or changing some of the, action or something to let the audience into those comic moments in a new way. So I always say, you sort of direct a comedy several times.
Right.
You direct it in your head before rehearsal, and then you direct it with the actors in rehearsal, and then you redirect it when it hits the audience.
Right.
Because a lot of it is to do with being incredibly precise about literally directing where the audience is going to look.
Yeah.
It's particularly with 11 people on stage sometimes. Everyone needs to know, I'm looking there now, and now I'm looking there.
Earlier you said about, it being a play about ambition and this central character, and he's, on the one hand, reflecting on who he is and how he behaves, and on the other hand, he's not really. He's just carrying on the same as usual. Do you think that it's also a play about Coward finding out who he thought he was? Or do you think this autobiographical stuff is slightly overdone in this? It's just because he was in it and it was about somebody who was in the theatre? Because when I was watching it, I thought you'd done this really clever thing that all the time the play, the serious undertones of the play, for me, kept shifting. So I sometimes thought it was about fame. I sometimes thought it was about relationships and who loves and why they love and why people work together. And other times I thought it was about ambition.
Yes.
And I've never felt that. Having read the play before, I'd always thought, it's just a bit sad.
Yes.
Whereas it was funny, but you got all of that in.
Well, that's a credit to everyone performing it as well.
Also.
But, the sadness is funny.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It is, as we know from life, unfortunately, it's funny. Terrible things can be funny. And terrible things going wrong are definitely funny, and that's why we laugh at comedies, because we sort of recognise, awful things and people behaving badly and people, which Gary does absolutely, half the time. But I think the process of the play is that character coming to realise that the sort of persona that he's built up for himself doesn't really work anymore, and he has to move on in life. And I think that's sort of my take on what, well, I mean, I think that's what the material is doing. As to whether Noel Coward is revealing a lot about himself in this particular play, I've no real way of knowing. I suspect it's all smoke and mirrors, based on a lot of the things that he did feel, of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, one way of being even more evasive about who you really are is to show people something and sort of say, that's what I'm really like. But actually, I'm not sure. I mean, quite apart from anything, he was a gay man. You know, that's something he couldn't write about then. And, you know, so he can't reveal himself, and yet, of course, he does.
And there's a lovely line that the theatre has been using in quite a lot of the publicity and on the website. You know, one of the lines from the play. So all you do with your talent is wear dressing gowns and make witty remarks, which I think is actually possibly a guide to life for all of us. But that sort of sense of whether you squander or use your talent. There are all these characters around the central character who also are wrestling with that themselves. You know, the young girl who wants to be an actress, has she got any acting talent? The secretary who is formidable and clearly cleverer than anybody else but is doing that job. The ex-steward who is looking up, you know, everybody is servicing this person. And I thought, again, that all of those characters you'd picked out really wonderfully, so that they seemed utterly themselves all the way through. They never just felt like the satellites round the great man. But that's quite hard, isn't it? Because they are supposed to be the satellites round the great man.
They are, yes, and that's definitely how it's written, but it's hopefully more enriching process, certainly comically, to sort of feel that there's a reality to each of their lives, those other characters. You know, in particular, I think the character of Liz Essendine, played brilliantly by Catherine Kingsley, is, I think, one of a really remarkable, if you like, woman character on the stage. In that you sort of go, it's quite curious, you sort of go, what is her game? Why is she still... She doesn't actually put up with Gary because she's left. But they're still very connected sort of business-wise, and they work together and are obviously very fond of each other. And then by the end of the play, there's some curious new arrangement. We don't quite know what, actually, but we feel that their relationship has gone on a journey and will maybe become something else, you know, after the play finishes. I mean,
they're fabulous performances across the board. I mean, when anybody comes on stage, you think, oh, well, good, I'm glad they're back.
Yes.
You know, and that's a wonderful thing as well. And so on. Who has already seen the show? Can I just ask, has anybody seen it yet? Oh, well done. Yeah, no. And who's going in this evening? Very good. So, well, I'm going to ask a slightly oblique question, which Sean is not going to spoil. The curtain call is fabulous. We're not going to say anything about it for those who have not yet seen it. Is that something that is you and the company that's added? And how does that happen if you are working with an estate of someone like Noel Coward? If you want to make individual choices, as it were,
yes.
How do you go about doing that? And
well, it's very simple. You don't tell them.
Look, he was in the audience.
No, of course, he was there, he saw it, but I didn't tell him before that. But
that is super sneaky.
Yeah, sort of sneaky. But I mean, it's kind of the like I was saying, and like Alan Brody was saying, that it's a comedy.
Yeah.
It's although it has although it is in a remarkable play and has, if you like, serious themes. Yeah, absolutely. It's there to entertain people in hopefully a sophisticated way. You know, there's lots of different types of comedy in it, and it does, as you say, have all these themes about fame and sexual relations, and you know, and Coward himself, and a life in the theatre, and all of those things. But in the end, I don't think you're doing your job with this material unless it is very fun. You know, it should be fun. And have you had fun? Yes, yeah. Mainly because I think the play is absolutely wonderful. So it's been a joy to work on, not just that it's funny, the lines are funny, but it's a quite brilliantly constructed play, I think.
And he is a brilliant writer.
He was an absolutely incredible person when you think about it. He not only wrote several really, really quite brilliant top-class plays that are, done forever and will be done forever, plus a lot of other plays that are very good, plus musicals, plus he was an incredible performer, a cabaret performer, plus he wrote over 350 songs, some of which are absolute standards. I mean, this is a remarkable person, incredible person, and actually from a very, low middle class background, he totally invented himself. Yeah. He wasn't posh at all. He, in many ways, what he wrote was satirising posh people, and they think they're being celebrated.
Yeah.
But they're not.
No, and also one of the things that's so interesting about the arc of Coward's career is that he had many waves of going in and out of fashion. So he was out of fashion for quite a long period of time, and then suddenly came back. And I think for many people, that moment when he suddenly appears as himself in The Italian Job with Michael Caine, and you think, oh my God, that's actually Noel Coward.
Yes.
It's the most extraordinary thing. So does it mean that you might now seek out other Coward? Do you now feel that you'd actually like to interpret others of his plays? Or do you feel this is your Coward moment?
Is that an offer?
Sadly, I'm a writer.
No,
I've got nothing to offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
wonderful. I just think he's a brilliant
and why do you think
writer.
You'd kind of resisted him before then?
I think what I'd seen is that maybe that what you're referring to before, done in a certain way.
The clipped.
Praised, I thought, overly. Just not the plays, but the productions, because they seemed to be delivering what everyone expected them to deliver, but they didn't really seem to me to, I didn't connect with it. But then I realised on reading this play, that I connected with him as a comic writer.
Yeah.
That's essentially it.
And you said it's a lovely image that you direct the play 3 times, as a director once in your head and all. So the play you directed in your head,
yes, and
the play that we are all either have had this brilliant time watching or are about to watch, how far apart are they?
I don't know, because I think it's quite close to what... Yeah. I mean, and it changes, of course, because you work on something for quite a long time, and it changes with everyone's input and ideas. Not only the actors, of course, but amazing set and costumes by Alice Power. And all of that changes as you work on it. Hopefully it grows. Your understanding of the play hopefully grows. And I think one of the wonderful things about theatre is that, or any piece of art really, is that it's not just what's in my head or what's, the actors are having their own experience, what's in their head, oh, my character is doing this, my character is that. And every single person who is watching it is also having the experience of, somebody could, equally valid, somebody could say, oh, I didn't like that at all. Load of rubbish. They might think that. I mean, who are we to say? Somebody loves it. Hopefully, we're in credit side. Mainly, I think people have really enjoyed it. But who's to say?
Yeah.
How they experience a piece of theatre is very individual as well.
Yes, and I mean, it's sort of the killer question in a way, that obviously there is still a tradition with theatre of press nights and reviews and all the rest of it. Do you pay attention to those things? What do you feel on a press night? Are you, I'm
mainly worried for the actors.
Because you don't want them to be unfairly clobbered.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because, I quite often feel, particularly actually with comedies, and maybe particularly with this one, the concept of it must be done like this. People also have that thing about Shakespeare as well. It must be done like this. Why? I mean, if it contacts an audience and people are enjoying it, then it's done its job. You never know there are Shakespeare police, some of whom are critics. There are coward police, some of whom are critics. You know, they could like it or not like it. But what I always know is that if you have your own opinion, you should hold on to that, because, let me put it this way, I think critics sometimes are more part of the marketing industry for something than our industry, which is putting on plays.
For entertainment.
For entertainment
yes.
of the public. And critics will have their opinions, but tremendous hits in the theatre and elsewhere have defied critics. It's just, you know, everyone's got their opinion, but you just have to do what you think is right, that is going to entertain people, I think.
I think that the really big difference between theatre and books is that if you get a terrible review as a novelist, the book is done. You don't have to go out every night and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously for actors, they have to give it their all every night to the audience, because it's the audience that matters. And
Yes.
it's in the end, it's the people who have spoken. And that's what matters, isn't it, really?
It is.
And all of
Completely.
Yeah,
Totally.
because it's that, for what it's worth, not being a critic, I think that this version that you have done of Present Laughter felt like, without removing it in any way from its time and place and context, you know, trying to make it, you know, everybody's in bin liners or whatever, you know, the latest thing is, it felt current and fresh, and for a modern audience, whilst totally respecting what it is. So I think, you know, if this doesn't turn new people to coward, I can't imagine what will. And everybody around me was having the best evening, frankly.
Great,
and I
wonderful.
think that's true, those of you who've seen it. It's just the best evening in the theatre, isn't it? It's your turn. You know that it's your turn now. Now, Louise has not had any exercise since last November, when we did the last pre or post-show talk. And now it is her chance to get healthy again. Louise, you look lovely. Sorry, that sounded terribly rude. And the first question, thank you, Greg, and welcome back.
Do you know everyone by name?
I know quite well. The thing is, I always would say this. The Chichester audience, I know I'm biased as a Chai girl born and bred, is, I do believe, the most literate theatre audience pretty much anywhere. And most of the people here come to support everything. So know their theatre. So I do know quite a lot of them by name. And I know that it will probably be Delphine next. Anyway, Greg. Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. Can I ask you a question? Because you've touched on some of this already, but I wanted to ask you a question about your theatrical journey as a director.
Yes.
And how that journey has led you here to Chichester to be a director, as opposed to, of your own production here, as opposed to a production you've brought here from somewhere else. And whether, in relation to this production here, whether you asked if you could be here, or whether you were tapped on the shoulder, could you do this, could you open up our season in 2018?
Well, Greg.
That's Greg, you see, Sean.
That's Greg.
Yes.
My background is really in independent theatre. I had my own company with other people, and we wrote our own shows. We put them on. We went from doing, you know, theatres much smaller than the Minerva, right up to then having, you know, success in the West End. And then after a little bit of time, I haven't stopped being a performer and writer, by the way, although people say, well, then I started directing, and I've been lucky enough, I mean, really, honestly, lucky enough to work on some terrific productions, and mainly, I would say, either adaptations or new comedies. So it's quite unusual for me to do like an already existing play and not sort of being able to change a word. It's partly because I like being able to work creating new comedy, but I couldn't resist this. You know, Daniel, who I'd not actually met before, just asked me if I'd direct it, and so I read it and I loved it. So that's the simplest answer I can give, is that I was asked to do it, and I read the play and thought it was terrific.
But do you think that's what, I mean, following on from Greg, sort of the context of Greg's question, do you think that that is actually a really powerful thing, that because you as a performer and a writer of comedy know the texture of it from the inside out rather than from the outside in, which often is what a director's doing. So that sense that you know what it means to be funny. So it makes it easier for you to direct other people doing it.
That's a possibility. I mean, I always think
You're very
maybe
modest, aren't you?
No, but the thing is, I always think, maybe rather egotistically, I think, I'm an actor, I know how to help actors, but then I think, hang on a minute, there's all these other brilliant directors who haven't been actors, and they seem to be able to direct things quite brilliantly. So it is definitely, as it were, part of my armoury, as it were. That I think it comes into play a lot more when you're getting up to facing an audience for the first time, particularly with a comedy. It's quite a forbidding thing. I mean, frankly put, what if they don't laugh?
Yeah.
It's an absolutely dire situation, and believe you me, I've been there. And you have to work out to do it. It takes a lot of experience actually to know how to sort of cope with that and roll with the punches, and then work out how to create the show anew, which is still only the same show, by the way, to bring it to an audience and get them to laugh. So I'm sure all of that experience definitely helps. Yes. Yeah. It can't but help, can it?
Help. No, absolutely. Another question. Delphine.
I'm interested in the thing about how you are approaching Noel Coward now. How much is the general zeitgeist? When you think of Terence Rattigan, for instance, he went right out of fashion because people started to think differently. And then he comes back. So how much of how you approach this now do you think is happening because you're picking up on a certain different way that people think about things generally? It's a very different era, and just whether that has any effect at all on your approach. The sort of intuitive thing of what's going on in the world out there, of what's going to work now.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Delphine?
Yes.
Yes. I would say from that, there are themes in the play that are perennial themes. And we see a character in the play going through a crisis, like most good plays. You've got to have some sort of crisis. And that dramatised and made funny, I don't think actually will ever go out of fashion. I think what actually has made maybe Coward go out of fashion is the sort of slightly inaspic version of this is how you're supposed to play him. But actually, when I was reading it, I just felt that they were very, very good, brilliant, in fact, comic situations. And that is the most important thing to me when I'm working on something. I just go, that is going to be funny because it's constructed in such a way that it can't but be funny if you play it right. So it comes back to this, for me, it always comes back to, do I think it will be funny for people? So in a way, I'm not your man if you want to go, we're bringing to this production to the world now because it says something very pertinent about the world. I don't really think in those terms. I genuinely don't. And yet, I think it probably does say something. It certainly says something about, how people get on and how that character lives. A sort of character who we might be very familiar with, a famous person, behaving badly, being glorified by people. It's a very, very current theme. So it can be of now, absolutely. But it's not really what I kind of tune into. Does that answer it?
Yeah, thank you. Another question. Gentleman up there, thank you. Thank you, Louise.
Now that most of the population, and presumably also actors, don't actually smoke cigarettes, how hard did the actors find it to virtually say all their lines while they're smoking?
They couldn't wait to start smoking. You give an actor a chance to smoke or hang on a door or, it's just marvellous. I mean, that is. I think everyone was looking forward, bizarrely, to doing Coward.
Cigarettes, are they?
No, you're not allowed real
No,
cigarettes.
that's right. So what are they? They're
Well, they're a
electric
combination
things.
of those kind of electric ones and herbal cigarettes as well. Yeah. I mean, just picture
It's
yourself.
really noticeable, isn't it?
Sorry, you're the first
Yeah.
questioner we don't know the name of. What's your name?
Yeah.
Andrew Berryman.
It's
Andrew, well,
Andrew.
I look forward to knowing you next time, Andrew.
If you just picture yourself, Andrew, with a cigarette.
We're doing it now.
just-
Everybody's doing it.
Just picture yourself, everyone, with a cigarette, languidly sitting there, saying something incredibly witty. Who
In a dressing
wouldn't want
gown.
to do that, basically?
Yeah. But presumably, right from the get-go, because it is less usual than it used to be, do the actors have a pencil or something? Or how early do those sorts of props come into their rehearsal?
I try to bring them in very, very early, yeah.
Yeah. So they're not,
yeah.
fumbling with them.
Absolutely. I've been trying to bring everything in very early. And luckily, we're at a quite brilliant stage management team as well on the show, who seems to be able to produce things at the drop of a hat. Even hats.
Even
at the drop
hats.
of a hat. Because actually, if you want to get the rhythm of the dialogue, you can't be taking a drag on a fag when you're supposed to be answering someone. So you have to actually even rehearse all of that.
Yeah, so that's
Can you believe it?
choreographed as much. Well,
Oh,
yes,
my God.
yeah. And that's why it's so sharp. That's why it's so joyous to watch for us in the audience, I think. Is there a final question before we... Gentleman there, thank you. Who is going to say his name as well, so we know everybody.
Hello, Philip Robinson.
Philip. Oh, hello, Philip. Sorry.
Sean, you said as you were conceiving the direction that there's that is in your head, there's that the actors bring to it, and then there's also the audience. But I wonder, the challenge maybe of Chichester, does the theatre itself pose any particular challenge? The fact that you have got, as Kate said, this glorious stage, does that cause any particular challenge in the production?
Yes, I think it does.
Thank you.
In that, rightly or wrongly, I think the play would have been written for a pros arch stage, and so here this is a magnificent theatre, as we know, quite brilliant. So you have to sort of think of things slightly differently, and it's particularly difficult. Farce doesn't work in the round. It just doesn't, because part of the thing you need to get in farce is that everybody in the audience is seeing the same thing at the same time, because it's all to do with entrance and exits and
That's so true, isn't it?
So it's very difficult. In the original stage directions, the spare room, as it's called, if people haven't seen the show, you'll get to know very quickly what the spare room is. The spare room is supposed to be stage right. But actually, we don't have a stage right. so that had to change. But I think probably for the benefit of a sort of slightly more contemporary take on, who's sleeping with who, basically, is part of what's, the plot of the show. So that it sort of helped us. But it is I think more of a challenge, or rather it's a slightly different way you have to play. You have to be very, very conscious of, I think, particularly with a comedy, it can't just sit on stage and everybody will be watching. It has to, in some way, be generous enough to take us all with you, with the play. And so we've had to do a lot of work vocally as well. So sort of being, I guess, big enough, but the effect is you're being very light. So yeah, it does have particular challenges, but also it's a great place to play.
And that is a wonderful moment to finish. I can't think of a more joyous way to begin the 28th season than this, and this production in particular, with wonderful company. I mean, those of you who haven't seen it yet, you've just got such a treat in store, and the sun has come out, and it's the perfect start to the season, and it's going to be a wonderful season, and I know you will all be supporting most of the shows that are on, hopefully all of the shows that are on. There will be a post-show on the 3rd of May, which those of you who are habitués of this will know will be members of the company who are having done a show will then come out and talk. But for now, It's just been such a pleasure, Sean, to talk to you, and we will give the stage back to your company who will need to warm up. But ladies and gentlemen, Sean Foley.
Thank you very much. Thank you.